Get religion.
Spider-Man has been a part of everyone's lives. Everybody loves him, some a little bit more than others.
Let's go! Let's go!
I genuinely hate this man. I don't know what is his problem. Either he has some screws loose or he's a genuine sleeper agent for Disney. And with all the hype of the new movie coming out, I am not going to be jumping on the bandwagon and giving my theories and talking about it. I am actually gonna pause here and say that the original concept for this video was to take a look at every Spider-Man movie in preparation for Spider-Man No Way Home. I left this video for a long time, but since all of this hard work went into it, I still wanted to release it. So rather than making it for No Way Home, I'm instead just gonna release this as a tribute to the Sam Raimi Trilogy. It's just gonna be about those three movies. That's it, because Spider-Man's 20th anniversary is coming up. So yeah, it's just going to be about the Raimi Trilogy. Sorry for this confusing intro, but hope you enjoy it regardless. So let's begin. Back in the late 90s, the big boys at Sony were looking to make a Spider-Man movie. They were looking around for potential directors to make the movie. First, going with James Cameron, who has gone on to say that it would have been one of the best movies he would have made in a while, even before the Avatar movie, which everyone, for some reason, knows, but no one can exactly remember the entire plot of it. The movie eventually made its way to Sam Raimi, who, before these movies, was known for making the Evil Dead series, a series in its own right. Just masterclass, absolute 10 out of 10 movies. That's not even sarcastic. I genuinely love these movies. I mean, look at this. Mwah. Beautiful. From the opening credits alone, you can tell that there was a lot of dedication put into this movie. The way that the webs interact and spiral in with the credits. It's a really unique touch that hasn't really been incorporated into many of the movies since, but I kind of think that's good because it separates these original trilogy from the other Spider-Man movies later to come. And this whole sequence, it just evokes so much nostalgia out of a person. I guess it's only fair to talk about the first thing that we get introduced to, which is Tobey Maguire's portrayal as Peter Parker. When he first gets introduced, he's obviously, the kid that no one likes, not even the other nerds on the bus, which is kind of a funny job at just how pathetic Parker is.
Don't even think about it.
Tobey's performance as Peter and Spider-Man, I'll separate them first. So his portrayal as Peter Parker is good. He's a pretty good, this kind of awkward nerd character. I think the only problem with this and every other actor who's supposed to be in a high school is that he looks way too old. And I know in these kind of movies, in so many movies like this, people make that jab, but honestly, look at this guy and tell me he should not be having a family and a job by now. So after that cute little introduction, we get introduced to... There he is. I will be talking about Willem DaFoe's performance as Green Goblin in this review for this movie, anyway, as much as I can possibly get the chance to. So we're meeting with the two characters of Harry and Norman Osborn, and Harry played by James Franco. A pretty decent performance as a side character, There are moments where it's not the best, which we'll see later, but I think he delivers a decent job. And we're also graced with, of course, this beautiful quote.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Also, I love this one extra in the back who just walks into frame in every scene that they get. Every shot, they are just always there lingering. It's really fun. Following from that, we get Peter and MJ's first interaction of the trilogy. This one being the most decent and kind of more flowing one that's more natural and kind of real, since it's kind of being there first. Because trust me, it will get a lot more tedious the more screen time that these characters share with each other as the movies go on. But without this first meeting, of course, we would never have the infamous spider bite.
Wait. Thanks.
I love this little thing they do with the DNA here. It's not really subtle at all, but it's really cool. In the next scene, we are introduced to Uncle Ben, a sweet, wholesome character who can do no wrong, and where absolutely nothing bad happens to this soul. Peter then returns home, and he feels himself starting to transform into the Spider-Man that we all know. Before we see the results of that, however, we cut to Norman doing some experiments, where this scene is the first of many to show a lot of what I like to call early Raimi-isms, where that basically means he takes a lot of the cinematography that he would have used in Evil Dead and applies it into the Spider-Man setting, which I think really makes it work for the movie. And it gives it some kind of intense scenes. Like, look at its goblin transformation and tell me it's not something from a horror.
Norman! Norman!
Back to formula.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, isn't even his final form. We then get to finally see the results of the spider bite, and we are graced with the iconic glasses scene. We also get this line.
Any better this morning? Any change?
Change? Yeah. Big change.
After this, Peter leaves, but before that, we are treated to a loving relationship between nephew and uncle that surely would belong in a Disney property for simply just for how wholesome it is, and definitely not foreshadowing anything.
Got it?
Sure thing, Uncle Ben. Don't start without me.
And don't start up with me.
Anyways, next we get hit after hit, iconic scene after another. We get this scene, which took no CGI at all. It really took the actors 156 takes to get this right, which is honestly, for the time, extremely impressive. Peter leaves, and I love the connotations of this scene because there's a lot of people in this cafeteria, and Peter is just running out of the room with a big-ass string of web behind him. So you would think that when Spider-Man starts appearing in New York, there would be at least one student that's there like, you know what, there was a kid who had a bunch of webs coming out of him. I do wonder if there's any relation to that. We're then graced with our first hint at Peter's spider sense, which is done in, albeit, a very 2000s way. And who could forget this wonderful line?
I don't want to fight you, Flash.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
It's incredible how this man would become Deathstroke years down the line. Everything about this next scene, I think, perfectly encapsulates the feeling and aura of these movies. From the little spider hairs growing out of his fingers.
How is my man supposed to schmeat his meat with this shit, bro? What the fuck?
To him climbing the walls and the music being perfectly on beat with his movements. To the, albeit extremely dated PS1 style CGI in this scene.
Oh my god!
We're then greeted with another Peter and MJ talking scene, which honestly, not too much happens. Really all it is kind of mostly just awkward dialogue between the two. but it's glossed over kind of almost quickly.
I want to act on stage.
Really? You're awesome in all the school plays.
Really?
Yeah. I cried like a baby when you played Cinderella.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Peter is then inspired to get a car and obviously money to impress MJ, and he goes with the most advisable option to become a wrestler, which is good for us though, because it leads us into the "with great power comes great responsibility" line, a line so iconic there is not a single soul on this earth who probably doesn't know it.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
To which then Peter just acts like a dick for no reason. Literally no reason.
And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
Peter arrives at the wrestling match where he is faced with a lot of actual notable people. One of them, of course, being Bruce Campbell, a close friend of the director Sam Raimi, who appeared in the Evil Dead movies as Ash Williams, the titular protagonist. An appearance from Octavia Spencer from Hidden Figures and Ma fame, a while before her career truly got off the ground, but I don't really know how you could peak after Spider-Man, but you know, people are different, I guess. And of course, Randy fucking Savage as Bonesaw in this amazing scene, honestly.
Hey, listen! It's some kind of mistake. I didn't sign up for a cage match! Hey!
Freak Joe! You're going nowhere! I got you for 3 minutes! 3 minutes of playtime!
This movie is so quotable, guys, oh my god.
What are you doing up there?
Staying away from you. That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
This movie is so quotable, guys, oh my god. Peter doesn't get the right money that he wanted,
I missed the part where that's my problem.
which ends up biting the guy in the ass, as Peter lets this burglar guy get away with the money.
Stop the game! Stop that guy! Stop him! He's got my money!
Thanks.
You could have taken that guy apart. Now he's going to get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Which then ends up biting Peter in the ass.
Ben?
Hey, Peter!
And listen, I know people give a lot of shit to Tobey's crying face in this scene, but honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Yeah, it's a little dated by now, but you know, he did the best with what he could do in this scene.
Cope. What? Yeah, that's right. Cope.
Peter goes after his uncle's killer, which will foreshadow the inevitable fate of every Spider-Man villain who ultimately ends up killing themselves rather than Peter doing the job for himself.
See ya.
We cut to a military base testing Oscorp equipment where Green Goblin shows up for the first time. Not really seen, but he launches an attack on them. And the general guy in this gives, I think, in this situation, probably the most appropriate reaction you could give. My man doesn't even try to assess the situation, he just accepts his fate. We get a great transition into Peter graduating from school and Norman Osborn kind of congratulating him more than his own son. Like, I love how James Franco just feels like he wasn't given any direction on what to do in this scene, so he just fucks off out of frame. Peter cries over Uncle Ben a little bit more, which finally gives him the motivation to suit up in the proper Spider-Man attire. We don't see just yet, we got a bunch of New Yorkers giving their opinions on the Spider-Man. Some good, some bad.
This is not a man. My brother saw him building a nest in the Lincoln Center fountain.
Opens up his hands, ropes come out, and he climbs up the ropes like a spider web.
Some kind of freaky little something. Wackadoo.
All this from a slice of gabagool.
We are then introduced to...
Who is Spider-Man? He's a criminal, that's who he is.
You absolutely cannot beat J.K. Simmons in this role. It is one of his bests. Maybe next to Whiplash Man. But other than that, This role was absolutely made for J.K. Simmons. It is great. So good that whenever they need to bring him back, they don't even get anyone else. They just recast him, but make him bald. I'll be sending my praises to this role and this character throughout this entire review for this trilogy anyway, as he doesn't actually appear in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, unfortunately. But I will give as much praise as I possibly can. We cut to Norman getting kicked out of his own company, Big L, and he reacts the same way that I will probably react once this video gets copyrighted to complete shit.
But you can't do this to me. I started this company. You know how much I sacrificed?
Which is then followed by an extremely early 2000s celebration.
I know we had a bad day, and you are so mad at me.
We then lead into our first fight scene with Spider-Man and Green Goblin, which I feel very mixed with. So let's run through it. You got Green Goblin coming in here like he's the Wicked Witch of the West. Mary Jane getting into danger, the first of far too many in this series. These skeleton effects, which are pretty dated, but still actually kind of look a bit cool. Green Goblin spitting some fire.
Hello, my dear.
We got this really stupid, dumbass kid who does nothing when he sees oncoming doom. He's just waiting on it. He's just so ready to die. He had so much time to move before Spider-Man came in, but he was just willing to have his life end. Spider-Man comes in, and this extra in the back kills me every single time. Okay, let's be real, this effect looks awful, and I'm pretty sure for 2002 it also looked really bad. We are then greeted with Green Goblin's thick, juicy acid screen. God damn!
Damn, boy, he's thick, boy!
Goblin and Spidey throw a few punches with each other. Spider-Man saves Mary Jane, which will be happening again a lot. And that's pretty much it. That's this whole scene. And oh, it is an absolute enigma of cinema. And the hits do not stop coming. We get this scene, which I think at this moment, there's another scene coming up that will be here in a while. But this scene specifically, I really like. Willem DaFoe's acting in this is perfect because is on his own. He is basically just acting with himself, because when you see this, when he is looking into the mirror, it took me so long to figure out how they did this, but they're basically just flipping the camera, and in between takes, Willem Dafoe is morphing and changing into two different characters, two different personas, like a Jekyll and Hyde performance. It's mesmerizing to look at, and it is extremely entertaining. I think it's honestly one of the highlights of him being in this movie, and part of it is mostly just really fucking funny.
Norman.
I love it. But you think that it's done there. Oh, no. Literally right after that, we get Green Goblin coming in, interrogating J. Jonah Jameson about Spider-Man. And there's a lot of speculation into the scene why he reacts this way.
I don't know who he is. His stuff comes in the mail. You're lying! I swear.
So one reason is I could just boil down to that Jameson cares that much about his money that he would never give up such information like that, thinking that maybe Goblin wanted some of the shares or whatever, given his selfish nature. A lot of other people think that the reason why he hides Peter's identity is to protect the guy, whereas there's a lot of people that contradict that, considering, well, why would he care about Peter? Because since he's so selfish. Honestly, it's weird. It's weird to think about. There's a lot to go with it, but I honestly just think it's really cool to think that he would just protect him like that despite his nature. Then we have what is probably one of my favorite moments of the movie as of recently. It is considered the precursor to the interrogation scene of The Dark Knight. It is phrased a lot differently, obviously in the more kind of campy tone, but I'm just going to let this whole monologue play out just to see how many chills I can gather from these words alone.
You and I are not so different.
I'm not like you. You're a murderer.
I chose my path, you chose the way of the hero. And they found you amusing for a while, the people of this city. But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
It's such a well-written piece of a monologue, and can be applied for many situations, minus the whole Spider-Man thing. But funny enough, when you really take into consideration throughout this trilogy, and hell, maybe even the entire franchise, that does happen. You know, people do like Spider-Man, but for a lot of the actions that he causes throughout a lot of the movies, people do hate him for a period until he redeems himself. Even now, with the new movie that's coming out, or more specifically the ending to the last one, you know, the people of New York probably hate the new Spider-Man now because they think that he's a murderer, so he has to prove himself innocent. So his words really do reign true in this scene, and it's really powerful. And hell, after what's probably my favorite scene in the movie comes the quintessential, most iconic scene of the entire trilogy, is the upside down kiss scene. There's not really much to say about it. It's just the scene itself. That slow-mo bit is kind of ass, though. We get some more Spider-Man helping out the neighborhood as he does before it turns into another confrontation with Goblin. But that's not Freddy! A more hands-on confrontation, like the first one. This time being a lot better than the first fight. Complete with absolute great banter.
Are you in or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
The stakes genuinely feel really high in this scene because Spider-Man gets pretty fucked up during this fight, and even in the last one, you know, it goes a little bit harder, but it's still pretty tense. I like it. I like it a lot. We then switch up from a whole different kind of tense. What I love is the pacing of this movie is unmatched. That's a lie. The second one's pacing is just absolutely perfect. But anyway, the pacing of how we've gone from Spider-Man Green Goblin fight to confrontation to fight to tense confrontation again is really great. How they managed to keep that up, and it's so impressive. Peter comes back and he's almost found out about immediately, and it's like a oh shit moment. The scene really elevates from then on, where, you know, Peter's cut gets noticed. Norman looks at it, kind of questions it a little bit, and he pieces the pieces in his mind, and he's like, oh, damn, alright. And you, as a viewer, you're like, oh, shit, okay, that's a problem. That's not great. And it's done perfectly. It's just done so well, man. Which is then followed by this goofy ass scene.
I can't.
Betrayal must not be countenanced. Parker must be educated.
What do I do?
Instruct him in the matters of loss and pain. Make him suffer. Make him wish he were dead.
Yes, but how?
The cunning warrior attacks neither body nor mind. The heart, Osborn. First, we attack his heart.
My man on the floor like he a tier 3 sub. The scene progresses from going from 100 to 1,000 in mere seconds.
Finish it! Finish it!
You cannot make this shit up if you tried. I absolutely love it though. It's corny as hell. It is extremely goofy, but it also shows the measure of Goblin's sadistic side in this movie. So it works. It just works. We cut to then another jump scare. Obviously another example of the whole early Raimi-isms that I was talking about earlier. To then Peter finding out that, surprise, surprise, MJ has been taken by the Goblin. Spider-Man is then given the grueling task between saving MJ, a girl who he is not with, but he has kind of grown a slight little connection with, or a bunch of kids who their deaths would probably rage on his conscience. And Spider-Man really says, fuck them kids! It does, however, lead to a really cool moment where the New Yorkers on the bridge help Spider-Man, and honestly, it's just really cool. And considering the time period that it comes out, yes, I'll say back then it was probably a little corny, but looking at it, it is also pretty touching. We then get to the undisputed best Goblin and Spider-Man fight. I just really like this one for how grounded and, well, real this one feels. Like there's a lot of tension in it, and it is brutal. It is absolutely brutal. Peter gets fucked up in this scene. His fucking suit is half ripped as well. Like, it is mad. Peter gets a few up on Gobby before he transitions back into what is supposed to be Norman in a good little kind of fake out scene that really worked.
Mr. Osborn,
Peter, thank God for you.
you killed those people on that balcony.
The Goblin killed. I had nothing to do with it.
Don't let him take me again. I beg you, protect me.
But because this Peter is smart, unlike some other ones, he doesn't bite into the trickery, and we get this great line and honestly pretty funny death.
Godspeed, Spider-Man.
Oh. His reaction to that always kills me. It's just a little, oh, it's just before the death. This will obviously lead into the trait of this trilogy, and actually future Spider-Man movies, of villains who end up killing themselves instead of Peter actually doing the job. As I mentioned before with the foreshadowing of the burglar doing the exact same thing. The movie ends, which will be a titular standpoint in Spider-Man movies yet to enter into the Tom Holland franchise, but the titular funeral scene, I swear to God, every Spider-Man movie will and always will end with a funeral scene, which I don't know why, but I guess it shows how influential this movie is. The unresolved romance of Peter and MJ, which does not get any better when the second movie goes on. Not that the actual relationship is handled worse. I mean, in their character standpoint, oh my God, they do not sort shit out, I'll tell you that much. The movie then ends with beautiful sweeping shots of Spider-Man just swinging around the city. The first Spider-Man movie, of course, did extremely well. It made over 114 million in its opening weekend, and worldwide it made about 800 million, over 800 million. So of course, a sequel was in order. Then again, even if it didn't do as well as it did, I feel like the trilogy still would have happened anyway. But my God, since it made that much money, of course there was going to be more. The credits for this movie start similar to the last one, but very different all the same. This one has a recap of the last movie, and I think this is what people remember more. I think it's a really creative way of, showing the last movie. I love how it's not only telling the story of the last movie, but the way the credits are framed with all the panels showing the scenes. It's framed like a comic book, which is a really cool choice. We start the movie seeing Peter working at a pizza place, but because of his Spider-Manning. He's always late and stuff, and it looks like he's on thin ice because the pizza place has a policy of delivering pizzas early. I always love that delivery. We get our first taste of Sam Raimi cinematography with these epic zooms that he had in the Evil Dead movies.
He stole that guy's pizza!
The extras in this movie are great. This movie brings in a lot more of Spider-Man swinging than the last movie did. I think there was about only like 2 or 3 scenes with this, but this one really shows it off well. Just the flowing movement of him zipping around the city is so satisfying to watch. Also, if you weren't already convinced that this wasn't a cinematic masterpiece,
Pizza time.
Peter gets fired from the pizza place and we see the return of who doesn't think Peter's pictures are adequate enough, since all he wants is pictures of Spider-Man to make him look bad. Peter is then seen at college where he meets Dr. Curtis Connors, who is a character that was going to be eventually used in this series as the character of the Lizard, but since it was only a trilogy, they never got the time. Basically, the whole point of this opening is to show that after being Spider-Man, Peter is finding it hard to adjust to his normal life and balancing being Spider-Man at the same time. It's really affecting his personal life. And they do it in a good way, but there's another way that they show it in this movie that works even better. Before that, though, we meet another fan favorite character.
Hi.
Hi. What's hi? Can I spend it?
This man is the definition of a Chad. We then cut to Peter and Harry meeting, I would say, the absolute highlight of this movie and one of the standout villains of the trilogy, Dr. Octopus, now only Dr. Octavius. But man, Alfred Molina does a great job in this role. His performance as this character it's just so charming and great to watch. I am extremely excited to see him in the new Spider-Man movie. I hope they do his character justice, because this character in this movie, he's absolutely great.
Oh, Rosie, I love this boy.
Remember how I said this movie opening scene perfectly showed how Peter is struggling to balance his personal life with being Spider-Man? Well, Sam Raimi knew how to balance that in this movie, and he did it in literally one shot, and I'm going to show you that right now.
You tried so hard to be someone that you forgot who you are.
Yep, that's it. In those few little seconds, he perfectly captured the feeling of what Peter is going through right now. From the music choice to the shot of the Spider-Man costume next to the suit, it is the perfect analogy for not just this movie alone, but for how Peter probably feels his entire life being Spider-Man. And with him being Spider-Man, he can never have a normal life. Crime is always going on in the city, so him being the hero that he is, he has to stop it. This is joined by overly enthusiastic extras, which is honestly, I think, the greatest part of this fucking trilogy.
It's a web. Go, Spidey, go!
We get some more really great web swinging scenes, and hey, look, another Bruce Campbell cameo. So Peter gets cooked and tries to brush this off by swinging around the streets, but realizes that his powers are fleeting somehow. We're then treated to what I think is supposed to come off as a really awkward scene, but I find this scene extremely hilarious. It goes on way too long than it really should for any movie, but it's just really funny with this interaction.
Looks uncomfortable.
It rides up in the crotch a little bit, too.
Upon further inspection, this scene is a completely different one that was released in theatrical cut. But I have always grown up with this version because I've always had the extended edition of Spider-Man. In this scene, in the alternate version of it, the guy's whole demeanor is completely different. He's less awkward and he's more just excited to be in the presence of Spider-Man. I cannot believe I'm only realizing that now.
And I just want to say that I think the image you have is fantastic. It's really put together. The costume, this thing, it's great. Might want to try some TV, you know. Can I riff for you? Can I come up with a couple ideas for you? Just what my company would do? Let's see, what do I got? How about a children's book? Let me give you a card.
I don't have any pockets.
Doesn't help, I do that all the time.
Slow elevator.
It's extremely goofy, but I absolutely love that scene. The framing and the awkward interaction makes it look like something from a Wes Anderson movie. So Octavius is showing the fusion reactor to a bunch of people. He also shows off his octopus arms that are supposed to be guidance in helping him with it. Who the arms in this movie were actually used practically, which I didn't know until recently. And it's honestly a really cool detail that we probably most likely won't get in the new movie, so it won't feel as authentic. I think the practical arms in this movie look so great. So we can all thank Eric Hayden for this beautiful puppetry that they use in the movie. So the reactor fails as expected. Spider-Man comes in and saves James Franco, and he's very grateful about it.
This doesn't change anything.
Dick. Otto's wife ends up dying, and Octavius' chip ends up getting corrupted. James Franco then delivers one of the most underrated lines of the series.
I have nothing left except Spider-Man. He humiliated me by touching me.
I don't know why, I just find it really funny. We are then graced with the best scene in the whole movie, and quite perhaps all of cinema. I'm gonna try and break down just how amazing this entire scene is. This is literally a horror movie scene. It starts off really eerie and atmospheric with this little shot of the hook thing just slowly moving around to the suspicion on the guy's face. The subtle reflection of the arm in the guy's goggles. The zoom into the guy's eye where he smashes into glass. The woman's scream from the arms going frantically around the place. The silhouettes giving off a more creepy feel to it. This is terrifying. The shot of the woman's body getting dragged away. Pure horror. With the claw marks and everything. This little bit with the surgeon fighting off the arm. With the zooms, it's just a clear homage to Evil Dead, even with the chainsaw being there. Even with this arm having a POV shot, which was used so much in the Evil Dead movies to always indicate the POV of a demon, and when they get this with three of the arms having different perspectives, forcing you not to look away. There is no such thing as a perfect movie, but there is absolutely such thing as a perfect scene, and that scene is one of them. We get this cute little name drop.
Doctor Strange. That's pretty good. But it's taken.
Immediately following that is the scene I'm sure you all know by now.
Could you pay me in advance?
We see Doc Ock grieving over the failure of his experiment, and this is what I like about the villain of Dr. Octopus. He's not driven by power or just means to be evil. He never meant exactly to be a villain. He's more driven by the guilt and regret of the loss of his wife and the failure of his experiment, but he's just consumed by this greed and the wanting to finish what he started. From the line that everyone has memed to death at this point.
I miscalculated. I couldn't have miscalculated. The real crime would be not to finish what we started.
We get a neat cameo from Joel McHale of Community fame, long before the show aired. Doc Ock then tries stealing money out of the bag, and he has his first encounter and prolonged fight with Spider-Man. It's really good. It's really well choreographed, and it's edited well. It gives you time to breathe. I hate most action movies nowadays where they've just cut everything, have a shot every second, but it's just so fluid, and I think it gets even better once they're out of the actual place and after he kidnaps Aunt May. Another example of Sam Raimi showing off his horror directing techniques. This is my favorite Doc Ock moment from this movie.
Hand her over!
Of course!
Easy now!
Butterfingers.
This fight is just really well choreographed. They're just always so creative with him bashing Spider-Man with the arms. Look, Stanley, love seeing Aunt May get one over Doc Ock in this scene. Big ups. There's not much to this scene. It just kind of shows how Peter's life is kind of falling apart because of him being Spider-Man. And we do also get some pretty cringe dialogue of him trying to recite poetry. And it hurts to watch every time. I don't know what they were trying to do when they were going for this.
I've been reading poetry lately.
Whatever that means.
Day by day, he gazed upon her. Day by day, he sighed with passion. Day by
Don't
day.
start.
Oh no, Gringe!
Peter posted cringe so hard that his powers don't want anything to do with him anymore.
No!
I like the callback to the first movie's wall climbing scene when this one ultimately fails on him, but the music cue is still somewhat similar. We see Peter deep in his psyche talking to Uncle Ben in his head, asking him to stay as Spider-Man as the people of the city need him in a more poetic way, obviously, but Peter wants to have his own life and be Peter Parker rather than Spider-Man, so as of now, he decides to give up the mantle. It's a sad day without Spider-Man, but hey, at least J. Jonah Jameson is happy. I absolutely adore this scene. Peter has a good day, just being himself without having to worry about Spider-Man troubles as copyrighted music plays over it, so I can't initially show the scene. Y'all know the song that plays. It is engraved into our brains now since the movie came out, but it's just good to see him just ignoring flat crime and just, you know, living a normal life. We get a really heartbreaking scene of Peter describing the events of what happened the night Uncle Ben was shot because Aunt May recently has been saying to him that it feels like it was her fault when really it was technically Peter's, by the way he describes it. And it's only sad because of just the little thing that happens. There's no dialogue or anything which shows you don't have to say what people are feeling in order to show an emotion. Just have something like this. We get another atmospheric scene of James Franco walking around, and it's all very eerie. It's basically just Sam Raimi flexing of how much of a horror director he is. Harry then tells him that if he wants to find Spider-Man, he has to go through Peter, because Peter is always taking pictures of him. And he gives him this piece of information as well.
Don't hurt Peter!
He was definitely listening to that. This moment's great, not just because it's shot really well, but it's also a really good display of Peter's spider sense in this scene. Also, what was going through Dr. Octopus's head? Throwing this at him, like he was supposed to get information out of Peter. If he just died and he wasn't Spider-Man, he would not know where to begin looking for him. We have these kind of shots coming back, which really just flexes on how good the cinematography in these movies are, and also the zooms are just really comical.
Peter Parker. And the girlfriend.
This man's performance is unmatched, I swear to God. Peter steals his suit back from the Daily Bugle, and he has finally returned as Spider-Man to try and stop Doc Ock, which follows probably the most famous scene and arguably the best scene in this whole movie. That is my favorite shot of the whole movie. It is so goddamn cool. They fight on this clock tower for a bit, and again, it's really well choreographed. The whole action sequences in this movie as a whole is really well done. It then escalates, of course, when the two of them start fighting on the train. It's such a creative place to put a fight for the two of them, because realistically, for the characters, it would be a really awkward space to duke it out. since there's so many hazards and, you know, trying not to fall off. Well, it isn't exactly too hard for these two, considering Spider-Man is sticky and Dr. Octopus has his arms that'll just make him cling to anything. So I guess actually in retrospect, it is the best place that these people could have fought on, because like here, they can just stick to the walls and shit. It's just such a cool sequence. Dr. Octopus then does a little trolling and makes the trade go haywire.
You have a train to catch.
That one there was a violation. Personally, I wouldn't have it.
Peter is then faced with the task of stopping the train before it goes off the rails and ends up killing countless lives. And he does it in the most memorable way possible. I am sure that this image will always stick into people's heads. And then we get the movie's obligatory Jesus reference scene, done subtly. Or is it? I honestly do not know if this was supposed to be intentional or not, but from the framing of it, I have a feeling that it was done like that on purpose.
He's just a kid. No older than my son.
He's like 30.
He's mine! You want to get to him, you got to go through me.
We get another rehash of the New Yorkers helping Spider-Man scene from the first movie. This one I like a little bit more. It's just more secluded and it feels a lot more personal. Doc Ock returns Spider-Man to Harry, where he gets to finally unmask Spider-Man.
If only I could cause you the pain that you've caused me. First, we'll see who's behind the mask. I can look into your eyes as you die. Peace. No. It can't be.
One of the biggest plot twists in history. Not really. Not to the viewer. Just to Harry himself. This scene is really cool. It's really emotionally compelling and kind of intense in a more subtle way. James Franco's acting in this scene is actually really good. I do enjoy the performance he gives during this moment. The pure shock that he receives from seeing his best friend as a guy who he thinks has killed his father at this time. It's really great. We finally get to the last confrontation between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. This one is shot really well. They do a lot of creative things with it, with Spider-Man swinging in and beating Dr. Octopus. This part where they end up just punching each other in the water. It's really creative with what they're given with. Mary Jane gets into danger again.
Can you shut the fuck up?
Doc Ock gets electrocuted, which brings him back to normal, with the aid of Peter, obviously.
You once spoke to me about intelligence. That it was a gift to be used for the good of mankind. A privilege.
Which then gives us a really great moment from Alfred Molina. Like, it's all him.
Listen. Listen to me now. Listen to me now.
Tell me how to stop it.
It can't be stopped. It's self-sustaining now.
Doc Ock then gets his redemption arc by sacrificing himself. But first we get this beautiful moment. An appropriate reaction, I guess. Which is all well and good, but can we get back to this boy?
I will not die a monster.
Makes the sacrifice very sad. Now everyone give it up for, I think, the best performance of this movie. Some more horror directing flexing here with this very atmospheric scene and the camera angles going into some Dutch angles up close and personal with Harry Osborn. It's a really neat touch that they do with it, and it's very trippy at times. It almost makes the scene very surreal considering what's about to happen.
Who's that? Son. I'm here.
He is returned to save us all. We get this cool little confrontation with Norman and Harry, kind of him telling him to give Spider-Man what he deserves, and Harry kind of battling his own thoughts about it, considering now that he knows that it's Peter, and the scene escalates to this really goofy ass moment that I love so much.
Avenge me! No!
Whoa! Touched a nerve there.
This scene pretty much alludes to Harry becoming the next Goblin for the following movie, so it's a little treat for the fans. We end this movie in genuinely, I think, the stupidest way possible. MJ just straight up leaves her wedding to be with Peter, and yeah, I know because he's the protagonist, it's cute and all, and it's all great and stuff, but realistically, this is really fucked up, especially for the guy who was supposed to be getting married for her now, whether that was for out of love on his side or whatever else. It still really stings, and their whole relationship the whole time in this entire movie, this entire series, is so convoluted and complex. Earlier in the movie, he tried to get her to cheat on the guy with him. Like, it's just, it's not it. We get some more really great shots of Peter swinging through the city, and that's the end. Oh, except for... Spider-Man 2 did insanely well as the first movie. Not as good. It made about $789 million box office wise, which is still really great, but it's a little bit less than the first movie, which is weird considering nowadays it's regarded as a lot of people's more fan favorites of this trilogy and considered one of the best Spider-Man movies as of now before the new one comes out. The third one was already clearly in place, but there would be a few problems running into production of this movie with Sam Raimi, the creator, and Sony as a whole. More specifically, a man by the name of Avi Arad. And you will recognize that name coming up for this movie and a little bit later in the franchise. Just keep that name in mind for the next little while, because that is kind of the downfall of the next couple of years of Spider-Man, which is pretty unfortunate. But not everything can be perfect. Kind of like this movie. But I'm going to tell you now, Spider-Man 3 is in no way a bad movie. People gave this movie shit for too many years. I'm going to put it on the record that it's actually good. It's not great. It's not amazing like the first two. But it is conventionally a good movie. Here is why. We get the infamous credit sequence of this movie. And in Spider-Man 3 is where it really comes into its own. They've kind of ditched the comic book look of it, and instead they're just showing the clips of the movie, which is a nice little recap. Again, it shows both of the movies this time in a really quick, refreshing way. This one visually is the best appealing looking one. I know the comic book one is really cool, but it's almost like, you know, watching a series and it gives you the whole recap of the previous episode. So it's a neat touch, and this is definitely the best looking out of all of them, with the Venom symbiote coming into the webs, kind of corrupting everything and making everything all black and edgy looking. It's really cool. We get the typical introduction. We have Spider-Man swinging around and Tobey Maguire giving the narration over it, saying how his life as both Spider-Man and Peter has seemed to clean up since the last movie. Hey, look at that. We get our first meme of the movie. Very soon for this trilogy, might I add. We get a little confrontation between Harry and Peter, showing that Harry still holds the grudge against Peter for killing his dad, quotation mark, because he still hasn't told him yet, and still, no one has bothered to tell him yet, because that's definitely an issue that does not come up later, don't you worry. Peter meets MJ, and she begs him to inflate her ego even more.
Tell me again, was I really good?
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up!
We then cut to Harry working on his own Green Goblin suit, technically the Hobgoblin suit, but he's never really established as that, but a lot of people would call him that in this movie, but technically he's just another Green Goblin that was never officially established, but we'll be seeing more of that later. Then we go back to Peter and MJ on a web, and it's just really cool imagery, seeing the two of them just chilling on a massive spider web, and they make it look really comfy as hell. Like, that guy was on to something when he was asking Spider-Man about making webs in hammocks. You know, he had a business plan going there. While this is happening, Venom crashes down onto Earth, an underlying problem in this movie, for the sole purpose, the fact that Sam Raimi did not want Venom in this movie, but he was just pushed to fuck to get him in it, which is kind of annoying that he had to shoehorn it in there, so for years he didn't get the right adaptation. Did he get the right adaptation now? That's for many people to decide. We're not going to talk about that today, though. Next, we meet the heart and soul of this movie, genuinely. I believe that the Sandman, played by Thomas Hayden Church, who you may know as another fan favorite and best character from an animated movie, Over the Hedge.
I believe someone phoned about an animal problem. The solution is standing before you. I guarantee that there will not be a living thing at this party.
Sandman is categorized as one of the villains of the movie, but in retrospect, looking at the entire trilogy, he's probably the most human character out of all of them. He does his life of crime solely selflessness to help his daughter in aid. Hell, even flat out says it himself.
Not a bad person, just had bad luck.
We cut back to Peter, who tells Aunt May that he's going to marry MJ, and she gives him the ring that Uncle Ben gave to Aunt May in their youthful years, and it's a really sweet scene between the two of them, and Peter makes sure to guard the ring with his life. I'm sure that will never get into any harm whatsoever. It's never foreshadowed at all. So Harry comes strolling up in, albeit kind of dated CGI, which is so weird because the jump from the last movie and this sequence CGI is kind of jarring. I don't know what it is with this scene in particular, but the rest of the movie isn't bad with its visual effects.
Harry.
You knew this was coming, Pete.
This movie is so quotable. I think as the fight goes on, it gets a little bit better. The choreography-wise, it's still great, as all the Sam Raimi fight scenes are. The CGI becomes a little less noticeable sometimes. This shot is really dope. The fight then ends in a pretty anticlimactic but funny way. I like Peter coming down to try and help Harry, even though he was the cause of probably killing him, or at least really hurting him. But it just shows the whole ordeal was an accident. The two of them are still friends in his eyes, so of course he would try and help him. So I think Tobey's acting here is also really good.
Harry! Come on!
We get back to Flint Marko, and he is about to become Sandman, and the scene that follows this is really great, but before we get to that, obviously we gotta see him transform before that, which is very safe, considering the scientist's perspective.
There's a change in the silicon mass.
Yeah, it's probably a bird. It'll fly away when we fire it up.
Initiating demolecularization.
How irresponsible can you be? You're supposed to be professionals. But because of their stupidity, we wouldn't have the Sandman, of course, which means we wouldn't have one of the best scenes in this movie. Even just watching the grains of sand going into his skin, going through his DNA, harking back to the first movie where the spider DNA was meshing with Peter Parker's DNA. It's a really cool callback to it, and it's done really well visually. We then get what is arguably probably one of the stupidest plot points in this movie from the knockout that Harry received during Peter and his fight. He now has amnesia, which means he does not remember the events of the past two movies. Very convenient for the writers to just not do anything with him for the next while, because, you know, we gotta introduce Venom at one point, which is great. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about this scene. For one, it's funny just seeing James Franco be this ditzy little goofy boy, but it's also bad because it takes forever for him to become a villain again later in the movie. Honestly, though, just listen to this man and try just not to laugh at how he acts.
I know that face.
Look at that stupid-ass smile as well.
My best friends. Give my life for them.
Really nice bit of subtle foreshadowing for later on in the movie as well. This is one of the most beautiful moments of the entire movie. It is so visually appealing and it is shot great. This whole little segment is like a complete short film buried in this Spider-Man movie. It's so well crafted, from the idea, from the writing to the effects. Everything about it is great, and I'm going to try and break it down to its bare essentials the best way that I can. We've no dialogue during this, just some somber kind of music as we watch the sand form into formation, knowing that there's life behind it as it starts rising up, creating the Sandman so elegantly, to him finally becoming almost whole. And I gotta say, the CGI on the Sandman during this scene is perfect. It looks so just great during it. I kind of wish they just kept him as like a normal thing instead of what he ends up looking like later on, but this looks so appealing. I don't know if it like won an award for any like effects work, but this scene alone should have garnered some kind of nomination at least. Just look at how beautiful that it's speaking. They managed to bring the facial expressions to life in this scene. There is so much emotion in what's happening, the way he just presses against his face, realizing what he's ended up becoming. He doesn't really fully grasp that to him or to the rest of society that he is a monster yet, and that's why it shows the locket that his daughter gave him. It shows that he still has some kind of piece of humanity in him, despite not being able to grab it. But through sure determination of the part of him that still is human, he gets everything that he can in his power in order to grab it with his normal hand, basically blending his normal side back with the sand side, so it's making the two of them whole again, rather than him just being this clump of sand without a soul. But he still is, and I just think that this scene really captured the essence of what they're trying to go for with Sandman in this movie. He isn't a villain, he's not a bad guy. None of them really are in this entire franchise. They're just people that have had bad things happen to them, and they end up turning to a life of crime because they think it's the only way that they can. But this scene is honestly just one of my favorite moments in the entire movie. It's really good. This movie is good, alright? We get another Spider-Man hero moment featuring the character of Gwen Stacy, 3 movies in, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is from Jurassic World fame and That Society show. The movie then gives us this movie's rendition of Eddie Brock. That's right. That little scrawny buck is Venom, played by Topher Grace. Listen, I'm not calling Topher Grace out as a bad actor in any means. I'm just saying, as the role of Eddie Brock, they could not have miscasted him any worse. Spider-Man ends up saving Gwen Stacy, and it's all well and good. We get the triumphant return of all of his scenes are honestly just so great. J.K. Simmons plays the role of J. Jonah Jameson so well. He's just so funny and passionate about the character. The fact that whenever they need him back in any form of media, he is always one to jump on it. It's just so great seeing how much that he loves playing the character so much. He breathes life into this role.
Continue.
Eddie comes in trying to snap up pictures of Spider-Man before Peter can.
You want a staff job and you want a staff job. Anybody care about what I want?
I do.
Shut up. Get out.
We get then the best Stan Lee cameo of the trilogy.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Mario is fucking balling! What the fuck?
We then see a celebration being held for Spider-Man, and this is the point in the movie where it's showing Peter's ego is starting to get the best of him. It's what this whole scene is basically representing. Harry shows up too, looking as dopey as ever. I swear, as this whole plot point goes on, he just becomes more and more stupid looking.
They love me.
Spider-Man comes swinging in and recreates the Spider-Man 1 kiss with Gwen Stacy, a subtle nod to their romance that blooms in the comics that was never gotten to be shown in these movies. Whether it was intended to be shown in the future or not, we will never know. Sandman starts rioting the streets, so Spider-Man has to leave his whole celebration to come and stop him.
I guess you haven't heard. I'm the sheriff around these parts.
Okay.
The action in this scene is honestly really good. I was gonna say it's more subdued, but I mean, there's still big stuff happening. I love Spidey just surfing on the car door. It's such a cool little thing. They always add just some of the most creative things into a lot of the fight scenes in the Sam Raimi trilogy. It's honestly so impressive. But the fight between the two of them is honestly it's really cool just seeing it. Just like a one-on-one thing where it's not too many things are happening. It's makes it more enjoyable to watch. The action in all of these movies are always just really great. Afterwards, we see Peter attempting to propose to MJ with our third and unfortunately final Bruce Campbell cameo of the trilogy. Sporting his fourth job of the series. What was the third, you ask? Well, it was only the impeccable role of a sort of spin-off movie, but technically still counts, in my eyes, his role as Coach Boomer in Sky High. We then get some more Peter and MJ relationship problems, how he basically calls him out on kind of cheating when he did the whole upside down kiss thing with Gwen Stacy. And yes, I will defend that, alright? As much as I do not like Mary Jane as a character in this trilogy, I will defend that. But then again, bitch, you have done the same multiple times in this entire trilogy. It just gets really annoying at this stage. I don't know whether to keep talking about this, but there is one particular scene later that really grinds my gears that I gotta really get into. We then get the biggest retcon of the trilogy, which I was initially not really a fan of, but for the context of this movie, I guess it does kind of work. We find out that the Sandman, Flint Marko, was actually the killer of Uncle Ben. I know, crazy, right? The fact that they have only decided to bring this up now and never before this movie, what a coincidence. It's not the worst thing in the world, honestly. It's kind of cool looking at it now, but my god, that this used to just really piss me off back then. It does kind of come out of nowhere, but, you know, it's fine. It's whatever. Peter sleeps in a Spider-Man outfit. That's kind of funky. Due to all the mixed feelings he's currently going through right now, the Venom symbiote, who has been in his room the whole time, takes the opportunity to be a part of him. And we see this through the POV shot that is, of course, the homage to the Evil Dead cinematography Sam Raimi used in his old movies, which is really great. I love that he's kept this up whenever there's like a demon POV. It's always done like this. It's really creative. And I love the silhouette of Venom that turns into a hand going down on Peter. He finally becomes so Peter gets the black suit, and for the time, I think the suit looks really great. Sure, it's just color corrected to just all black, but I think it looks really cool for what they did with it. It's just a really nice design. And the reveal of it, I just think was really well done.
This is something else.
With his newfound abilities, Peter goes after Sandman.
See you, chump. What the hell?
In all honesty, as good as the action is in this scene, it is just pure and utter comedy.
What does it matter to you anyway?
Along with that, it's also a really brutal fight, and it just shows the amount of abuse that Peter is putting onto these new powers. And yet still, at the same time, you get shit like this. After Peter kills the Sandman, he becomes emo, and his whole demeanor starts to change.
Give me rent.
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
Peter breaks the news to Aunt May that the killer of Uncle Ben is supposedly dead. And I like this scene because I feel like it is subtly saying that in this movie, Aunt May has figured out by now that Peter is in fact Spider-Man without initially telling him. She's kind of, giving him the whole revenge speech of how it can take people over. It's almost as if she's kind of stirring him away from the idea of it, when he, on the other hand, thought it would have been a good thing, whereas she's, of course, the opposite, trying to guide him. I think it's a good way of showing how, it's up to interpretation, whether she knows or not, but it's never fully stated. We get this nice reconciliation scene with Peter and the landlord, who delivers such an underrated line that I don't think people meme enough, honestly.
Then you say, you're a good woman, I'm a good man.
MJ then cheats on Peter with Harry because she's the worst character in this trilogy, then immediately regrets it, which somehow leads to Harry getting his memory back, and now he's one of the villains again. It is so funny.
Avenge me!
So Harry then decides to kidnap MJ, which then leads into what is quite possibly, I think, the worst part of this movie, and the absolute most stupidest scene and stupidest decisions anyone could have possibly made in this situation. Peter and MJ meet up at this bridge place, and basically she tells him that, oh, they have to break up for some reason, for a really dumb reason, because in the context of the scene, Harry is basically, I guess, forcing her to break up with him. Which is the most dumbest fucking thing ever. I know. Oh my god. Okay. The way this could have been handled is the fact that MJ could have just went to Peter and been like, hey yo, listen, bro. Harry is like a couple of feet away. He's hiding behind a tree like a fucking dumb shit. We're gonna pretend to break up. We don't actually have to fucking do it. I don't understand. I don't understand how they thought that this was the way to approach this. That they actually had to go through with it. What the fuck kind of logic is that? It is so dumb. It is so incredibly stupid. And then Harry has his fucking smug ass face, little shit. Fucking... oh my god, I know this is supposed to be a serious video, I know it's supposed to be like a big brain analysis video, but Jesus Christ, this scene pisses me off every single time I watch it. It could have been handled in so many different ways. It's so goddamn annoying. Anyways, after that fiasco, we get a little heart-to-heart with Peter and Harry, which then James Franco delivers, I think, one of the most funniest moments of the entire trilogy.
How's the pie?
So good.
Boy, if you don't get... the implication of this bit is just so good because he pretends to be so cool, and then in reality, he's literally just under the table. You can see the guy looking behind him, just further showing that he just climbed under the table, which is really funny to me. The fact that they brought such a realistic approach to how someone would do that. He just hid. He just hid away for no one to see. It's so funny. It's almost a parody of itself, honestly. It's almost like a parody of the first two Spider-Man movies. It's just full comedy, and I love it. We then get an absolute banger of a Bully Maguire moment. Nowhere to be found, and he suddenly appears. The two of them then break out into a fight, which I realize is not supposed to be taken seriously at all. It's literally two dorks duking it out with each other, and they have no sense of fighting ability, except Peter, obviously, but even when the two of them are just going at it to each other in this closed space, it still just looks kind of pathetic, and I feel like it's supposed to be filmed that way, so the two of them are just kind of punching each other in the face and not really doing much else, even though Harry is trying to kill them most of the time. But all I look at when this scene is just two nerds beating each other up.
Stings, doesn't it?
Protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass.
What the fuck is this movie? Well, the more realistic approach to the scene, if I were to go in depth with it, it's basically just the breakdown of two friends who used to be really close with each other and now turned against each other due to circumstances. But really all this scene is a bunch of really quotable Bully Maguire moments.
Oh. Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
It's alright though, because the payoff leads to this really cool moment. After that, Peter sees that Spider-Man is getting some more bad press, even worse than he usually gets from the Daily Bugle.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
In which he goes to confront Eddie Brock about it.
It's funny you should say that, because I was looking through some old photos and it looks very, similar. You want forgiveness? Get religion.
I like that line because as corny as it is, it's also a really good indication of some foreshadowing. Peter then exposes Eddie Brock showing pictures as if he was a person on Twitter showing fake screenshots of a conversation between them and a YouTuber that they want to expose for no reason. We then get, of course, the infamous Bully Maguire dancing scene. Honestly, I love it. As cringe as it is most of the time, it's honestly just a bunch of fun. It is so contradictory of itself because Peter tries to act so cool when really he's still just a big fucking nerd underneath all of that. And the women around him, you never know if they're like disgusted by his presence or if they're just really turned on by him. It's so hard to tell what people think about him during this scene. The way he acts is honestly just so funny. This part where he just sits in Jameson's chair, just fucking, it's so funny. It's so fucking. And then he goes out of his way to bust out the moves. Peter takes Gwen to a jazz club. Willem DaFoe makes another cameo, and Peter breaks into another dance number like he's Jim Carrey in The Mask. This scene is so ridiculous. It just escalates and escalates. It goes from 10 to 100 in mere seconds. It's just so entertaining to watch. So many people hated this, but I honestly have no idea why. It is just so much fun. It is incredibly entertaining. The fucking gust of wind that comes out of nowhere is hilarious. Come on! And who could forget such an iconic line?
Now dig on this.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for.
And after that, Peter has a gamer moment. Peter then realizes that the suit has consumed him so much that he has to find a way to get rid of it. While at the same time, Eddie Brock is gone to church from the foreshadowing line from earlier that I stated. Basically saying how Peter has been so much of a menace to his life that he literally asks God to kill him.
I want you to kill Peter Parker.
Peter realizes the only way to get rid of the Venom symbiote is through sound, so he starts banging on the bell and it comes off of him, and it eventually leads us way to being attached to Eddie Brock. You know, it's a decent way of getting it to happen. I mean, in this movie's context, just remember that Venom was never supposed to be in this movie. Venom was just not an option for a while. The studio pushed it so much, and this was kind of Sam Raimi's response to it. So I don't know if he completely fucked it up, but it's definitely not the greatest version of Venom. At least this shot of him being fully consumed by him is honestly really dope. Venom meets up with Sandman and tries to be intimidating to get him to help him kill Spider-Man, but it's really hard to be intimidating when you sound like this.
I want to kill the spider. You want to kill the spider. Together, he doesn't stand a chance.
Interested?
No. MJ gets kidnapped because that's all this bitch is good for in this movie. This movie especially. So Peter finally dons his original costume again in order to save her, almost completing his arc for the movie. Peter tries to get Harry's help with no avail. It's only when he's prompted by the second most stupidest part of this movie.
The night your father died, the blade that pierced his body came from his glider.
You can argue, in context of the movie, it's fine that he's telling him this now. But in retrospect, this would have literally been the first thing he would have told him when he first found him dead and found that it was his own glider. Why the fuck is he only telling him this now? This and the breakup thing from earlier in the movie is the most stupidest parts of these movies. Every time I watch them, I get so angry. It is so incredibly dumb. Oh my fucking God. Peter comes to rescue MJ as we reach the climax of the movie. Peter and Eddie then duke it out with each other, and the fight is pretty well done. You know, it's entertaining. This whole climax is actually one of the best bits of the movie, surprisingly. The last like 20 minutes are actually good. Whoa, crazy, am I right? But yeah, no, the fight is actually pretty well choreographed and stuff, even though if it is technically part and part CGI fest. I know I complain about that kind of stuff a lot, but, you know, it's well done. It's alright. It's nothing too great to write home about just yet, but it's a decent climax for this movie. Sandman joins the fray, and then he turns it into this big fucking thing. The two of them get the one-up on Spider-Man in, honestly, a pretty brutal scene where they're both beating the shit out of him. And then Harry comes in way too late than he really should have.
It's like just in the nick of time.
A couple minutes ago wouldn't have been so bad either.
When Harry comes in, it's when the fight really gets going. I love when he blasts Sandman and he sets him on fire and his arm turns into glass and it shatters. It's a good, real, you know, scientific method of beating him. It's really creative, the way they were able to achieve that. Horror director Sam Raimi comes in flexing once again.
Can we pretend that please? You know it's like shooting stars. Can we pretend that airplane?
Venom then proceeds to get a little fruity.
The suit! You gotta take it off!
Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
Harry sacrifices himself in the most poetic way possible. To which then we get my favorite bit of foreshadowing from the entire franchise. You didn't realize it? Remember this scene?
Hey, listen! It's some kind of mistake! I didn't sign up for a cage match!
It was all leading up to this, baby! We get a taste of what Venom could have looked like in the movie. Honestly, I really like this little bit where he turns into this massive monster. I think it looks so much better than the Venom we were given. If he was this the whole way through, he would have been a lot more memorable. But no, just this little taste. And then, look again! Another Spider-Man villain who decides to kill himself rather than Peter doing it for him. We love to see it. We love to see it. Sandman comes back and he explains what really happened the night Uncle Ben died, to which Peter replies by having his character arc complete when he forgives him about the incident.
I forgive you.
It's honestly a really heartfelt scene. I really like it. It's a good little wrap-up for both characters in this movie. So Sandman fucks off, Harry dies, we all cry. Top that off with an infamous funeral scene. Hey look, Flash even showed up to it. That's pretty thoughtful of him, and it's a niche character that I'm kind of glad they actually decided to include during the scene. It's not even that noticeable, but it's really cool. Anyway, after that, that's pretty much it. We're kind of left wondering whether Peter and MJ fully reconcile between the end of the movie. Whatever happens to their relationship is up to interpretation, but they kind of leave it open-ended. You kind of like to imagine that they end on a good note, and that's the kind of thing that we like to believe that they do. Look, this movie is not perfect by any means. This trilogy, it is definitely the worst movie out of all of them, but it's still a good movie. It is in no way a bad movie, and I enjoy it. As annoying and as angry it makes me at times, I still get a good kick out of it, and I still watch it every time I rewatch the movies. I never skip it, because it still has a lot of entertaining value. Spider-Man, to a lot of people, I think would be more than a hero. He stands for something, and when you see a kid saying that he wants to be Spider-Man, he is most likely thinking about, you know, just being this superhero, being with powers. But if you were to hear, you know, someone later in life probably say that they wanted to be Spider-Man, your first instinct would probably to laugh at them and maybe even ridicule them. But you really gotta think about the context of what they're trying to say. When someone's saying that they want to be Spider-Man, it means that they want to be the best person they can be. They want to strive to be their best selves. And that's what the character and what these movies, I think, really do try to convey. They balance Spider-Man and Peter Parker's life so well with each other, showing how much he grows over the course of 3 movies, the arc that he has with everyone around him. It just shows you can just be the best person you can. And every time I watch these movies, I feel strive to be that. I want to try and do better. I want to be the best version of myself. And these movies do help feel like that. Because out of all of the Spider-Man movies, I think that's the message they should try to go for the most. And these movies especially really convey that in the best way. Do these movies have their problems? Absolutely, but that doesn't argue the fact that these are really great superhero movies, and the current landscape that we live in with all the superhero movies now probably wouldn't exist without these. I know there's been a lot of superhero movies before this, for years, for decades before this, but with the context of them, the humor they put into them, the story, the heart, I really feel like this is what elevated the genre most. I love these movies. You love these movies. This video was probably really redundant in repeating a lot of things people have already said before, but still, I just wanted to make this to show my appreciation for the Spider-Man trilogy and to have insights that I personally found in them, and just to show how much they meant to me and how much they will probably mean to everyone else. So hopefully you agree with this video. If not, I don't know why you bothered watching this fucking movie length long review of all the 3 movies. In conclusion, to summarize, Raimi trilogy good, Snyderverse bad.